After 5 o'clock today. Jalen Bridges, of course, was last week, West Virginia, and then we had Caleb Lohner from Brigham Young join us yesterday. Those have been added to the Baylor roster. It's been some transition, attrition, and addition, and we're now joined by Ashley Hodge, very much in tune to what's happening with Baylor men's basketball. Ashley, let me ask you this, and I guess it goes down to this. Where they are right now on the roster, Adam Flagler is on the roster, even though he's at least going to put his toes in the water. If he wants to come back, I'm sure there's an open door. Is there an open door for Matthew Meyer?
Well, it's a different world. First of all, good to be on. Enjoy the show. Love what you guys are doing. You guys are on top of all these new transfers, and I love listening to it myself. But it's a different world with NIL because technically you can go over the scholarship limit. You would have to structure an NIL deal for the player that you go over the scholarship limit so that they could afford the tuition at the school that they're in. But that does make it interesting. But the spirit of your question, I don't think there's a spot. I think this is a clear indication that, hopefully Matt's going to stay in the NBA draft and be able to, get a two-way deal or even get drafted in the second round. And this would be the end of his college career. I know that was his intention. There's been some rumblings that he might transfer. So we'll have to watch the transfer portal the next couple of days to see if he puts his name in to still have an opportunity to come back to college. But I don't think it's going to be at Baylor if he does that.
Well, Ashley, that would be very telling because he only has a couple days to do it. So if he doesn't do it before May 1st, then we know what his intentions are. And my thought yesterday on Matthew Meyer was this is a really good coaching staff that's taken him a long way. And maybe it's time for him to jump into pro basketball, which he is capable of being a professional basketball player. And at whatever level that is, they can fix whatever is and make him that complete player that he never quite was at Baylor.
Yeah, it is interesting now with these two-way deals because NBA rosters can expand, up to like 17 players, I believe it is. So every NBA team is taking two more guys, and these two-way contracts, you're getting paid $275,000. I mentioned this on a podcast I did with Kendall Cow, but you got guys like Lindy Waters that are have a roster spot. You got Mac McClung, you got Hillbilly Kobe over at the Los Angeles Lakers, Austin Reeves. I mean, you got a lot of guys that you wouldn't have thought would stick to an NBA roster that are finding a spot. So I think that really bodes well for Matt Meyer and James Akinjo. I could totally see those guys getting two-way deals. And if Maceo gets healthy, I think he could also get a two-way deal at some point. He had a pretty injury-plagued season this past year. But the bottom line is there's more opportunities for guys that can play. And I think that Matt and James have a pretty good shot of making that a reality.
So, Ashley, a lot of transfers to talk about. It's been quite the run the last few days. Let's go ahead and start off with Jalen Bridges coming over, staying within the Big 12, but jumping over from Morgantown. What are your thoughts on his commitment last week?
Well, I love the way this roster has developed. First of all, I like that Baylor will have some certainty as to what the roster is going to look like on June 1st, and they can just get to work and start preparing for the season with all hands on deck. Now you're going to have, I think LJ Cryer might not be until July 1st before he's full speed. And, certainly Adam Flagler, I think the decision to come back is a June 1st decision. But those guys, like having them work together during the summer. But I'll mention this. This was told to me by someone and it rings true. Jalen Bridges and Caleb Lohner both were coached by guys that are known for being pretty hard on their players. So I think, they're going to come into Baylor and Scott Drew may be a real breath of fresh air, just the positive reinforcement. And it might also inject new life into the other guys on the team that, these guys may be telling them, man, you don't realize how great your coach is and how positive he is and give appreciation for everyone that stayed. But I think Jalen gives you, your 3-and-D, Kendall Brown type of player, but he also is a more consistent three-point shooter. I'm very excited about that addition, and I think Caleb Lohner brings a whole different dynamic. He gives you that Ish Wainwright, Royce O'Neal, Mark Vital glue guy that's going to do all the dirty work, do a lot of rebounding. Some of the things that Jonathan would have done if he was healthy. But Caleb, I think, is now that guy that's going to fill that role.
How much does that help take a little bit of the load off of Flo Thamba physically inside?
Is big time, and vice versa. Like if you were playing Caleb at the center, like he played a lot of that for BYU, and that's physically exhausting and really, affects his game at all levels when you're having to play the biggest guy and fight those battles inside. And when you got a warrior like Flo to do a lot of that for you, then, it's going to help Caleb. And Caleb's going to help Flo because Caleb is a phenomenal rebounder. Like his rebound rate per minute is one of the best in the country. And I think he's going to take a lot of pressure off of Flo in the rebounding department as well. It's a very well-constructed roster, a lot of flexibility. I think you're going to see most of the scoring come from the backcourt. You got 4 guys there that I think could average over 12 points a game, and Flagler, Cryer, Keontae George, and Langston Love. But ultimately, you win games by having guys that are stars in their roles, and certainly Jalen Bridges, Caleb Lohner, and Flo Thamba are 3 guys they're probably going to rely heavily on.
So Flagler, where do you think right now, if you read most draft analysts, they had nothing about him in the draft beforehand, and now here he is, testing it. Do you think he does, in fact, come back because he just needs to see where he is and where he needs to get better for next year's NBA draft?
I do. I think it's going to be helpful for him in a lot of areas, to go through this process. But ultimately, I think he's going to have to display an ability to be a full-time point guard. I mean, that's what the NBA wants to see. And that's where the opportunity is, I think, for him this year. And I think he's going to excel at that. I really am excited about his ability to excel as the point guard in this offense. He is terrific, reading ball screens and being able to get to that elbow and knock down jumpers. And he's displayed, as the season went along, just a great ability to read coverages and get to the rim for easy, layups at the rim. And he's a great shooter. I think when he's fully healthy, he'll display, that 40% plus 3-point ability that he did, 2 years ago on the national championship team. And I just think that having as many options in the backcourt to score that Baylor will have this year with Cryer and Love and Keontae George and Dale Bonner and D'Antoine Grimes, I think that's going to really take a lot of pressure off of Flagler to be, the guy that carries the load scoring wise. And I think it's going to lead to better shot attempts for everybody.
So, Ashley, how on your radar was D'Antoine Grimes out of Kilgore College before last night?
Well, I had a little birdie tell me about him a couple weeks ago. So I knew about him, and I'm excited. I love guys. When you talk to him, I think here in a little bit, you're going to sense that he's a no entitlement guy. He's got a humility and a mindset to work. And, he just kind of reminds me of that Davion, that Kenny Cherry, so many guys that have come through Baylor, Royce O'Neal, Torian Prince, that were unheralded, that turned out to be terrific players. You got 3 years of eligibility. He's got a burst to him. He's got a nice step back. He's athletic. He's strong. He's tough. I'm expecting, some noise from him in the future. Maybe not next year, but certainly as you look down the road, I think he's going to be a great player for Baylor.
So when you mentioned most of the points are going to come from the guards, and then you look at the guards and with Flagler and the decision he has to make, but Flagler, Cryer, George, Langston Love, who we didn't get a chance to watch because of the injury. These guys and Bonner, who I thought grew up dramatically during the year as well. So the Flagler thing, is this very similar to what Butler and Davion did? I mean, Butler and Maceo did a couple of years ago, in your opinion, with Adam?
Yeah, different dynamic because when Butler and Maceo tested the waters, they didn't have, we're still in that COVID freak out phase where there weren't the combines and a lot of the activity that you would normally have, like Adam will have this year, wasn't available to them. But I do think I'm expecting kind of a similar outcome. I think that it's possible that a team falls in love with Flagler and wants to draft him and gives him a guarantee. That's not outside the realm of possibility. But I think the likely scenario is he comes back he shows that he is a reliable, everyday point guard and can really help his draft stock for next year. And, I mean, you see guys that are sticking in the league these days, Chris Duarte, who played, is a 4-year guy, and you see guys like Van Vliet, and, there's plenty of examples of 4-year guys that just Buddy Hield, that just got better every year in college and were able to eventually catapult that to, being able to stick on an NBA roster and make the big money. So I hope that's the outcome for Flagler. He's such a great guy and such a steady, guy from a character standpoint that I think he deserves that shot, but I think he would be better off waiting until next year.
Ashley, obviously some folks around the Big 12, around the country, follow college basketball or paid attention to the recent moves made by Baylor. Has there been anything else around the Big 12, or even if you want to go farther out just nationally, since Baylor's in that conversation, that's kind of made you raise your eyebrows like, oh, okay, that's interesting?
Well, I mean, I think you got to look at some of the stuff that's happening with NIL. There's Oscar Shibwe supposedly got $2 million to stay at Kentucky. That's incredible money. Nigel Pack, a guy that, played on losing teams, good player, but never won, at the Big 12 level, gets $800,000 to go to Miami for 2 years. I think that some of these numbers NIL-wise are pretty eye-popping. I've heard, Arkansas doling out $400,000 or $500,000 per player. Texas Tech, a couple $100,000 per transfer. I don't know where this madness is going, but I do like that Baylor seems to be focusing on the right things, and listen, let's not take shortcuts to get to the ultimate goal here to help get you in the NBA, and let's not look at trying to get a short-term $200,000 and foregoing possibly 20, 30 million, in the process. So I think the guys at Baylor seem to be focused on the right things, and not that this NIL arms race isn't going to matter and that it's not going to play an impact in some recruitments, but to my knowledge, it really isn't playing much of an impact in the guys that are joining the Baylor roster or continuing to play for Baylor. They seem to be focused more on the bigger goal at the end.
Ashley, thank you. Appreciate your time and kind of helping break down Baylor's roster with the additions of Bridges, Loner, and now, of course, with Damon Grimes, who we'll talk to today in an hour or so. Coming up next, Baylor Director of Athletics, Mac Rhodes, Sic'Em365 Radio and 365 Sports. Don